Down in verse number 7, we'll begin to read. The Bible said, "In that night did God appear unto Solomon, and said unto him, Ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon said unto God, Thou hast showed great mercy unto David my father, and hast made me to reign in his stead. Now, O Lord God, let thy promise unto David my father be established. For thou hast made me king over a people like the dust of the earth in multitude. Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before this people. For who can judge this thy people, that it is so great? And God said unto Solomon, Because this was in thine heart, because thou hast not asked riches, wealth, or honor, nor the life of thine enemies, neither yet hast asked long life, but hast asked wisdom and knowledge for thyself, that thou mayest judge my people over whom I have made thee king. Wisdom and knowledge is granted unto thee. And I will give thee riches and wealth and honor, such as none of the kings have had that have been before thee, neither shall any after thee have the like." Let's bow tonight for prayer. Brother Chuck, take us forward in prayer for you. Amen. Thank you, Brother Chuck. You can be seated. Well, you can pretty much figure out, I guess, what quality we're talking about. We've been talking, this is our fourth lesson in the series about I want what they have. The first message, we talked about the strength of Samson. The second message, we talked about the obedience of Noah. And then last week, we dealt with the faith of Abraham. And this week, what are we talking about? It's something that Solomon has. Wisdom. That's exactly right. Y'all are sharp. You got most of it down. All right, so the wisdom of Solomon. Now, really, if you look, when you look at Solomon, let me say it like this, and I don't want to say anything out of bounds necessarily, but when you get to the end, when you study Solomon's life and you get to the end of his life, Solomon did some boneheaded things. I mean, if you really read, if it was out there to try, Solomon tried it. If Solomon could try it to see if he found pleasure in it, Solomon tried it. Solomon had a bunch of wives, a bunch of concubines. He acquired to himself riches and horses and all of those. Solomon really done some things that were not very smart, yet he's known to be the wisest man in all of Scripture. And it just kind of goes to show you that, we're still have a choice to make, that God doesn't force things on us, and decisions are there to be made. But the wisdom of Solomon, Solomon was a very wise king, and God used him in a great way. And so you're going to get to see from very early in Solomon's reign, his kingdom, Solomon prays this prayer, or in response to a request that God had, or a question that God asked him, Solomon is going to respond in this way. So the Bible said, "In that night God did appear unto Solomon and said, Ask what I shall give thee." Now that's an open-ended question or invitation. Solomon, whatever it is that you want, ask it. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't know why God did that, other than Solomon found favor in the eyes of God. Solomon was the recipient of the lineage of the Davidic covenant, that son was always going to sit on the throne of David. God chose that to be Solomon to continue that process. And so, obviously, God loved David. David loved God. And so, at the beginning or early in the reign of Solomon, God comes to Solomon and said, "Solomon, whatever it is that you want, ask for it, and I'll give it to you." Now, what would you ask for? What would, if God come to you, and He's not going to do that, but if God come to you and said, "Hey, listen, ask anything that you want, and I'll give it to you," what would you ask for? Now, we're sitting in church, so our mind probably goes to spiritual matters. Immediately our mind goes to spiritual matters. But if no one else was around and no one else ever knew that question, what would you really ask for? Some of y'all be rolling in here Sunday, man, a brand new vehicle with spinners on it. You just be decked out. And I don't know that, but that's how our mind works, right? No one would have faulted Solomon if Solomon would have said, "God, I want it all. I want it all." From a human standpoint, we would probably have said, "Hey, there you go, Solomon. That's the way to get it while you can." But yet Solomon stopped for just a minute, and Solomon said, "God, I need wisdom. I need wisdom." Now, that in and of itself, and I'm going to jump way ahead to my conclusion, all right? But I am going to fill in the blanks, so don't get too excited. But when you look, Solomon had enough sense to know that he needed wisdom. Where did that come from? I thoroughly believe that that came because David had instilled some things in Solomon that Solomon, you're going to need the wisdom of God if you're going to rule this people. And so David, maybe from a very early age in Solomon's life, David began to prepare. And at the end of the message, I'll show you why there's biblical proof that David did that for Solomon. All right, but so Solomon was already keenly aware that, man, I need the Lord. I need God's wisdom. I need God's intervention. All right, and so I hope that as we sit here tonight and we look at, you're probably never going to rule Israel. I hate to bust your happy bubble. You're probably never going to be the president. I mean, you might make it, but you're probably not going to be the president. You're probably not going to be the governor, although I'd probably vote for you. You're probably not going to be the governor. We're probably not going to be in the same scenario that Solomon is. But yet at the same time, you're definitely going to be in situations in this life where you're going to need the wisdom of God. And so all the other messages I've been talking about, I've been prefacing by saying, I want what they have. But tonight, it's not only do I want what they have, but I need what they have. I need the wisdom that God gives to navigate my life, to pattern in the ways of not just the everyday ways that we encounter people, but from a job standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a ministry standpoint, from dealing with people. It's amazing to me how many times that you can find yourself in a situation where you really just don't know what to do, or you really don't know what to say or counsel to be given. And, there's things that, from a ministry standpoint, there's things that Bible college just can't teach you. I'm for Bible college. Yes, I did finish. I'm for Bible college. Brother Chuck went to Bible college. He would tell you he's for Bible college. But I'm going to tell you, there are things that you can't get from books that you're going to find yourself in places to where, God, I need your wisdom to help me to navigate this in this circumstance. And so the wisdom tonight of Solomon. All right, first of all, I want to ask some practical things. What did it take for Solomon to ask for wisdom? Now, you say, well, preacher, that's a dumb question. It just took him asking. No, I believe it's a little deeper than that. All right, the first thing that I believe that you'll see when you study the life of Solomon, especially when you study the whole duration of his reign, when you study how he interacted with people, you go over even the book of Ecclesiastes and you see the type of lifestyle that Solomon lived. I believe that very early in his ministry, Solomon had a quality that I believe that would help us, because I believe, first of all, it took humility for Solomon to ask for wisdom. It takes humility for us to ask for help. It really does. It takes humility for us to go to somebody and say, hey, I'm in over my head. I just don't know. I just don't know, how to conquer this. And you guys have heard me laugh about, and you have laughed. Some of you with me, some of you have laughed at me, but over my lack of plumbing expertise. It came up on our memory feed the other day that it was the anniversary. It had been, was it 5 years? I believe it was 4 or 5 years since my mental breakdown over plumbing in my house. And Brother Brennett showed the picture, and it was the Saturday before I had the breakdown, because the breakdown happened on Sunday whenever I finally threw up my hands and say, you know what? I'm done with it. I ain't messing with it no more. And Dad kept saying, oh, let's try one more thing. I said, you don't understand. I'm done. Well, let's just try it again. I said, I'm done. I can't do that. It broke my pride to pick up the phone and say, hey, I can't do this. Do you have anybody that you can send? Because my inspector's coming this week. Can you send somebody? That was hard for me to admit. Now, it's easy for me to do now, because I just go ahead and acknowledge the fact I'm not a plumber, and I don't want to be a plumber. And I don't even like plumbers. All right. But it took a humbling for me to ask. Now, we laugh and we joke about that, but we're really pretty prideful people. Now, I want you to think about for just a minute, put yourself in Solomon's shoes. What was Solomon? Solomon was the king. Kings do not want to show weakness. Leadership, when it comes to showing and displaying strength, you want a leader who displays strength. A world leader, a world power, you want someone that is strong, that is confident in what they do. And here's God coming to Solomon. And he says, Solomon, ask whatever you want me to do for you and I will. And Solomon said, God, I need wisdom. I want your wisdom. I personally believe that took a sense of humility, because it would have been easy for him to develop the attitude that, listen, I'm the king now. I've got what it takes to be. David thought that I had what it took. It's apparent that I have what it took, and nobody's going to tell me how to reign. Now, if you don't think that happened, study once the kingdom divides after Solomon and read after some of those kings who had that mentality, who sought the wrong counsel even. I believe it took humility for Solomon to simply say, God, I need wisdom. All right, now, not only do I believe that it took humility, but I believe it took self-awareness. Now, think about it. Solomon had servants, he had a palace, he had money, he had possessions, he had power. All right, all of these things, most people say, I had it made. But yet, he had a self-awareness about himself that caused him to ask for wisdom. Two things about this. First of all, I believe that Solomon recognized his limited ability. At the end of the day, when all the servants had gone their way, all the servants were back in their chambers, wherever it is that they lived, and all of those, the cooks and the maids and the ones that worked, when all of those people were gone, and it was just Solomon and God, at the end of the day, Solomon was just a man. He's just a man. He's just a man that was wrapped in flesh, just like you are. He's just a man who had insecurities, just like you do. He was just a man who had fear, just like we do. He was just a man who had uncertainties, just like we do. Be brutally honest for just a minute with yourself. If you're honest, and maybe you're not this way, but you're probably like the rest of us, there have been times that we've probably all went to bed at night thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do with this situation. People expect me to know what to do. I don't know what to do. And God, I need you to help me, God, because I'm telling you, God, I don't know what to do. Listen, there's times that I can't believe that I get to be the pastor, because I'm still looking for who's going to come by and be the pastor, Brother Terry. You say, what do you do? God, you got to help me. God, you got to give me leadership. God, you got to give me wisdom, because as a self-awareness, I can recognize, man, I have limited ability. Now go to 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings chapter number 3, and I want you to listen to these words. In 1 Kings chapter number 3, and down in verse number 7, listen to what Solomon says. He said, And now, O Lord God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father. Listen to this. These are the words of a king. And I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. Now, from an outset, can you imagine somebody in the kingdom had walked in on this conversation? This is the king. This is the guy that they're going to follow him into battle. They're going to leave their families. They're going to go marching into cities on the word of this guy right here. And they heard this guy say, God, I was a kid. I don't even know which way to go. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I don't know how to go out. Don't know how to come in. Solomon would be like one of them guys on them doors in them buildings. Them revolving doors. He just don't know how to get out of them, Brother Chuck. He just, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Now, this is the king. But he had a self-awareness to know, God, if you don't teach me and if you don't lead me, God, I'm going to make a mess of it. What is that? That's self-awareness. I believe it took humility. It took self-awareness. And then he recognized the enormity of the task. The enormity of the task. God doesn't call people to little ministries. You understand that, right? If God leads you into a work, into a service, that is not a menial or minuscule service. God calls you with purpose, and therefore, it's a weighted responsibility. But here's a man that God called to be the king over his people. Over his people. That's a huge task. That is an enormous task that God has laid upon his shoulders. Verse number 8 of 1 Kings 3. He said, And thy servant is in the midst of the people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. And yet, here's Solomon. He's supposed to rule and judge all of these people. Their well-being is in His hands. How their country and government operates in His hand. What I'm saying is this: there had to be a self-awareness in order for him to ask for that wisdom. He knew it's a great task, and there's some holes, there's some gaps in my life that I'm going to need somebody to fill up the slack. And then I believe he had confidence in God. Confidence in the Lord. Why is that so important? Because if you don't have confidence in somebody, you won't ask Him for something. If you don't trust somebody, if you don't have confidence that they're going to do what they say, you're never going to ask them. Had he not had confidence in God, he would have waded through being the king and done the best he could and tried to leave God out of it. But he had confidence in the Lord. God asked him, and he confidently answers. I believe where it come from, you can find in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse number 3. The Bible said this, and Solomon loved the Lord. Now, do you see that for just a minute? Why could Solomon trust God that God would do what he said? Because Solomon loved God. Solomon just loved the Lord. And then the Bible said not only did he love the Lord, but he walking in his statutes of David his father. So here's Solomon loving God and walking the way that David had followed God. Solomon now is picking up the mantle, so to speak, and walking with God. All right, so he began to trust God. So what it took for Solomon to ask for wisdom? It took humility, took self-awareness, and it took confidence in the God that he was asking. All right, let's look at number 2 tonight. What was his motive for wisdom? Now, we're talking about wisdom, that I need this kind of wisdom. Listen, I need to allow myself to be humbled in order that I may call out to God. I need to have self-awareness to know that, listen, God, I've got to have you. There's way too much pride from pulpits all the way through the pews that feel like that we know what we're doing and we can handle this without the Lord. I need a self-awareness to know the enormity of the task. All right, I also need to know that I can trust God. The same God that saved me is the same God that can equip me, and I can trust Him. All right, but what was his motive for wisdom? He says back in 2 Chronicles chapter number 1, verse number 10, he says, give me now wisdom and knowledge. Solomon, what do you want? Here it is, God. I want wisdom. I want knowledge. All right, but what was his motive? Now, we've already talked quickly about the reason why he asked. But his motive, notice this, his motive, it was a pure motive. In other words, his motive was not a self-exalting motive. It was not something that he was looking, okay, what's going to serve me best? It wasn't a false sense of piousness, if you would. So what was his motive? Well, first of all, I would say this. In 1 Kings 3:12, he says, behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart. God answers his request. God grants his wisdom. All right, but before that, he says, God, give me now wisdom. Give me now wisdom. All right, to effectively accomplish God's task that God had given him was the first motive. In other words, Solomon, he wanted to not just do the job, but he wanted to do it well and be pleasing unto the Lord. It's one thing to do something and just get by. It's another thing to do it with excellence and to excel at it. Solomon said, God, I want to do that, but I want to accomplish it to the fullest, that I can be everything that you want me to be. Listen, if we're not careful, we can wing it, can't we? We can wing it. We can go through life and we can wing it for a little while. You know, fake it till you make it. You know, we can have some of that mentality. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be successful in the eyes of God, we're going to have to rely on God's wisdom to teach us and to show us how to do what He wants us to do. All right, what was his task? His task was to judge or to govern the people of God. 1 Kings 3:9, the first part of that says, Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. All right, the word judge there is a word that means to govern. To govern. Now, it's one thing to be king, but it's another thing to govern. All right, now let's use our practical mindset for just a minute. Governing requires caring to a certain degree for your people. All right, it requires a balance. It requires that of the betterment of your country, to the betterment of your people, to maintaining law and order, to establishing law and order, to make righteous judgments when things come up that are uncertain. I mean, there's a lot that goes in to governing, okay? Anybody can bark orders, but not everybody can govern. And the word to judge thy people is a word that literally means to govern this people. Wouldn't it be great if we had some people in charge of governing this country that would pray for the wisdom of God once again? That would pray, God, give me wisdom as I am now responsible to govern this body that you've put me over. These people, these families, this society, these communities, God, give me wisdom to govern. Now, if we have never been, whether you realize it or not, most all of us either are now or will be in a position of governing something. Your household. You govern your household. It is mom and dad's responsibility to govern their home. Now, I'm going to give you something free, okay? We got some in here that's, your kids are on the way out. Some of you, some of them's on the way in. All right, let me tell you, it is your, that's a little bit too. All right, it is your responsibility, not your child's, to govern your home. All right, now, I know that Solomon's not talking about raising kids here, but I want us to understand something. We need the wisdom of God to govern that which He's made us responsible for. All right, think about, there's times as parents, if your kids knew, y'all don't tell nobody, you teenagers in here, don't tell the little one. They'll lose confidence in their mom and dad. But if your kids knew the times that you went to bed at night and really didn't know how you were going to handle a situation, it'd probably scare them to death. If they knew the times that you went to bed at night and you were like, okay, we got all of these bills to pay, and we got groceries to buy, and we got this, or we got a situation at work, or we've got all that. Everybody wants to be older until they get older. Basically, when you're young, you just want to be in charge of something, but when you get older and get in charge, you just wish you was young again with no responsibilities. All right, why is that? Because we've got to learn to govern. But when we do that, when we govern our home, understand that our decisions do not just affect us. All right, but it will affect our spouse. It will affect our children. It will affect those that we encounter with. And so therefore we can see how that we would need the wisdom of God to govern the area of our life that God has put us into. Now, magnify that as if you were governing the people of Israel. And you understand, He was the government, okay? He's the king. He's the government. All right, so he said, God, I want to effectively accomplish the task that you've given me. And then he asked for discernment, for wisdom that he may understand good and bad. You know what that is? That is ethical versus evil. If you really look up those two words, it's very simple. Know how that I can be able to discern what is ethical from that which is evil. Man, listen, we need some more of that today too. We need some more of that today too. But not just in the government, we need it in the home. We need it in the church. To discern between that which was ethical and that which is evil. He's going to deal with a lot of things. Not every king operated ethically. Even David had some problem with ethics. Even David. Ask Solomon's mama about some ethical and unethical things that went on. Ask Solomon's mom, Bathsheba. Ask Bathsheba's first husband if David had some problem with ethics. Sure he did. Sure he did. All right, but now, David was a man after God's own heart. Don't miss. I'm not trying to throw David on the bus, but I'm telling you, we all need the wisdom of God to be able to make righteous discernment between that which is ethical and that which is evil. All right, so he's praying, God, give me wisdom. God, I want to effectively accomplish. In other words, God, I want to do and do well what you have called me to do and laid upon my shoulders to do. Isn't that our goal and desire in our Christian walk? Is to effectively do well what God has called us and led us to do. If you're a Sunday school teacher, I hope it's your goal to be the best Sunday school teacher that God would allow you to be. If you work with young people, God, help me to be the best influence with young people and the best teacher that I can possibly be. Whatever area that you may serve in, God, help me to do it effectively. Help me to be the most positive influence on the workplace that I can be. God, that's my lot in life. Help me to do it well. We're going to need the wisdom of God to do that. You know, as we face things, as things come up, as things that are unforeseen that we can't control. That was kind of out of the blue. Let's talk about this and we'll move. Do you think Solomon ever encountered anything that he never in a million years thought he'd ever would? Finish reading chapter number 3 of 1 Kings and you will. 2 harlots have babies. One baby dies, one baby lives. Now two harlots are arguing over the same baby and come to the king and bring that to him. Listen, David never said, now Solomon, one of these days, son, you're going to need this wisdom because you're going to have 2 harlots that's going to come to you. One baby's died and one's alive and they're going to be fighting over the one that's living. Solomon would have said, do what, Dad? That's never going to happen. You see, there's all kind of unforeseen things that come up in life that we're going to need the wisdom of God for and to know how to get the wisdom of God. So to effectively accomplish the task God has given. And then to lead before the people as an example. All right, now I want to give you this. Go back to 2 Chronicles, chapter number 1. While you're turning back over to 2 Chronicles, chapter number 1, do you remember the statement that he said? Back in verse number 7, he said, and now, O Lord my God, I'm back in 1 Kings 3. He said, and now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. All right, that's the way the wording is in 1 Kings. But in 2 Chronicles, listen to what he says down in verse number 10. He says, give me now wisdom and knowledge that I may go out and come in before the people. So Solomon acknowledges the responsibility not only to judge right, but to walk uprightly and as a testimony before the people who are, get this, looking to him for leadership. All right, when we think about people that look unto us for an example, that, by the way, that can be overwhelming. That can be to think that somebody, now, it's one thing to know that your kids are looking up to you. But if you've ever been in a place to where other people are looking up to you and are looking to you for guidance, and a lot of times we don't even know who they are. Well, a lot of times we may never even know. You might be on a workplace and somebody notices something as simple as that you don't use profanity. By the way, I hope they can notice that about you. That's a good thing to notice. They don't tell raunchy jokes. They don't drink the same stuff we do on the weekends. I hope they can notice those things. And you may not, that there might be somebody sitting in the shadows that's just watching and saying, man, that's how I want to be. And then when you give a word, maybe you're not even trying to give advice, but you speak on something, they're watching and say, hey, you know something? I like what they have to say because I've watched how they live. All right, here's a guy that in and out, everything that he does is under a microscope. Everything Solomon does. Why? He's the king. I don't know of any day before everybody lives under a microscope today. Social media, it's out there. One picture, and it's all over the world. I am thankful that social media was not around whenever I was in school, because I was an idiot. Worse so than I am now. I'm grateful. I'm telling you the truth. I'm grateful. We didn't have any discernment. We was too dumb to care. I'm just telling you. And once it's there, man, it's there for everybody to see. And you know, you can't take it back. You can't take it back. It's there. Ministry. Everybody always talks about, people in ministry. They call it living in a fishbowl. Everybody can see. A fishbowl is round. It doesn't matter where you turn. Everybody can see. All right, and there's some truth to that. Although I do believe we ought to be living our life in where it doesn't matter if we're in a fishbowl. All right, but you ought to be living yours the same way I had to live mine. I don't think it ought to be a double standard fishbowl. I don't think you got to get a reflective glass on yours and mine's got to be transparent. I think it ought to be the same for both. That's free. That didn't cost y'all nothing. All right. But now what I'm saying is this. Man, there was Solomon. Everybody's looking at every little thing that he does. They're nitpicking it. They're tearing it apart. And by the way, you always got people in your corner, and you always got people in the opposite corner. It don't matter who you are or where you're from. You always got a crowd that likes you. You got allies and enemies. And Solomon had them. But you know what Solomon said? He said, God, I want wisdom so that I can walk before the people the way that I ought to. I want to be the kind of king. I want to be the kind of servant to you, God, that everybody knows. I need the wisdom of God to do that, to lead before the people. So what it took for Solomon to ask wisdom took humility, took self-awareness, took confidence in God. What was his motive? To effectively accomplish the task God had given him. And then to walk as a testimony before it and to lead the people. All right, third of all tonight, God grants wisdom. Now this is so simple. God said, Solomon, ask what you want. Solomon said, here's what I want. And God said, okay, here it is. All right, so I read that. I read the passage back in 1 Kings chapter number 3, verse number 12 earlier, and I'm going to read it again. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart. That's what God told Solomon. When you read this, be very cautious, especially in 1 Kings, because it's like 3 verses. In 2 Chronicles, I think you can find all this in one verse. But be very careful that you do not allow the bonuses of verse number 11 and roll into verse number 13 to take your mind's eye off the fact that God answered a specific prayer. What were the bonuses? By the way, we like bonuses, right? We like bonuses. Some of y'all are getting ready to get a Christmas bonus. You're not going to turn those down. You're going to take them. You're going to cash them. I used to get, y'all pray for me. I used to get a little upset because I worked with Jehovah's Witnesses. Back when I worked at the warehouse, the Food Line. They don't put up a Christmas tree, don't celebrate birthday, Easter, Hanukkah, nothing. They just don't do it. But they cash them Christmas bonuses. They cash them. Now, they ended up wording it a little differently so they wouldn't feel guilty in taking them. But everybody else said, this is our Christmas bonus. Now, 2% of it was like personal days. 2% was that, and then 2% was bonus, but you call it what you want to. We like bonuses. By the way, I ain't throwing rocks at you. I wish they'd have given more. I wish they'd have donated them. I'd have tied to a Baptist church off of them if they'd have given me one of them. Now, we like bonuses. Now, God gives Solomon some bonuses. He said, Solomon, what do you want? He said, God, I need wisdom. God, I need wisdom first and foremost. And God knew his heart. God knew the purity of his heart. But then the context with verse number 13 says that God went ahead and gave him the riches, honor, potential length of days. We see in verse number 14. But don't allow that to take away that God specifically answered a request. Verse 12, behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart. Let me give you 3 or 4 things about God granting wisdom. First of all, it was immediate. It was immediate. Man, immediate wisdom would be awesome. Would be awesome. How many of you went through high school? Anybody go to college? Anybody get your master's? You too. What in the world? You ain't even got out yet. Don't you graduate this year? I think yours is up in the air. I've talked to somebody. There's some people that they go to school a long time. Y'all need to go a little longer to get knowledge. To get knowledge. Listen, I like to have fun. They started it, just for the record, sis. They started it. But they go to school a long time to get knowledge. And here, Solomon got it just like that. That'd be awesome. Now, I am grateful that oftentimes when we need the wisdom and we go to God, that God can grant us the wisdom for a situation or scenario right then. God can give that wisdom. God can give that discernment. Now, listen, I'm not going to make a lot of speculation as to how He does it. I just know that God's done it in the past, and I'm so grateful when He does. All right, why? Because I'm in over my head, and I need the wisdom of God. But it was immediate. It was immediate. In other words, it was a gift. God gifted that to Solomon. Now, my twisted little brain, it makes me wonder, did Solomon just feel smarter? I mean, think about it for a minute. Was Solomon just like, I didn't know that. I know that. I don't know. I mean, my mind, I can't help it. My mind just works that way. But it was instantaneous. And it didn't have to go very long to be proven, because I already mentioned the scenario where they were going to come before Solomon. Now, can I take a time out for just a minute? Y'all ever read that story of the two harlots? Have you read it? How bright was that one? I mean, think about it. She was dumb as a brick. Now here's one. She's crying. She's taking my baby. And Solomon said, okay, let's cut it in half and give each of you half. And she's like, I'm good with that. Under what planet do you think that's a great idea? Now, again, let me get back to preaching, but I mean, that just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Yeah, let's cut them in half. That's good. I mean, it'd have been different if they'd given them joint custody. You get them one weekend, I get them one weekend, whatever. But he said, let's cut them in half. And she said, okay. I don't know. Wisdom. It was immediate. And it was proven. But God gifted Solomon with wisdom. Second of all, I like this. It was significant. All right, we're not just talking about a little bit of wisdom. We're not just talking about a little bit of knowledge. But we're talking about a significant amount of wisdom. Now, you're in 1 Kings chapter number 3. Go to chapter number 4. And I want you to listen to verse number 30. Because the Bible says in verse number 30, and Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country, and all the wisdom of Egypt. All the wisdom of Egypt. Now, Egypt had per history, some pretty sharp guys. All right, what about those guys? You remember when God was going to bring the children of Israel out? And God would send Moses and Aaron to go, and they would, he threw the rod down and turned to a serpent. And they had some guys in the kingdom there that could duplicate some of that. Right? In Egypt. And here the Bible said that Solomon's wisdom, man, them guys were sharp dudes. That's probably demon possessed, but they were sharp dudes. All right, and so here you find that Solomon's wisdom excelled so much that God said his wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. Listen, it's Christmas, okay? I know, the Magi, all right, they were from the east, okay? Smart guys. Now, again, don't come geographically. I have no idea. I wouldn't argue with it. But they were some sharp dudes. He said his wisdom excelled all of that crowd. In other words, it was a significant amount of wisdom. Can I tell you this? God knows how to give us not just enough wisdom to skate by, but a significant amount of wisdom that we can accomplish his task that he's laid upon us. And so it was a significant amount of wisdom. What about this? His wisdom was influential. Wisdom that's for our own personal benefit is one thing. But we need the wisdom that others will benefit from. All right, you're in 1 Kings 4. Look down at verse number 34. The Bible said, and there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon. From where did they come? From all the kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom. When you go to the New Testament, the Bible tells us in the book of Matthew and also tells us in the book of Luke how that the Queen of Sheba came just to see and learn from Solomon's wisdom. Now, I'm grateful those passages go on to tell us that the greater than Solomon is here, talking about the significance of Jesus Christ. All right, but when we look at this, his wisdom was influential. In other words, the wisdom that God gave to him made other people better. And other people learned because of the wisdom that God had given to Solomon. All right, it was God's desire, another thing, to grant Solomon wisdom. Now, put that in your brain for just a minute. God asked him, what do you want me to give you? Solomon said, God, I want wisdom. Listen, God did not begrudgingly say, oh man, that's the one thing I didn't want you to ask for, Solomon. No, God was happy to grant him wisdom. As a matter of fact, God was so pleased to give him wisdom that God went ahead and rewarded him because he asked for wisdom and not the other things, those bonuses we talked about. What does James 1:5 tell us? If any of you lack wisdom, what? Let him ask of God, which giveth to all men liberally. God still delights in granting people wisdom. Listen, God does not want you going through life oblivious to be able to accomplish His will. How do we do that? We ask God, God, give me wisdom. Give me wisdom in this situation. Give me wisdom to govern my life. Give me wisdom to govern the ministry, whether it be the ministry of my family, the ministry of my job, the ministry at the house of God. Give me wisdom to govern these areas in my life so that I can accomplish your purpose for my life. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, which giveth to all men liberally. Now, something significant about the wisdom of God. I'm going to have you turn to the book of Job, chapter number 28. God's wisdom from God is different than wisdom from the world. It's different. The only way you're going to get the wisdom of God is you're going to have to get it from God. I'm going to say that again. The only way that you're going to get the wisdom of God is you're going to have to get it from God, which goes back to a relationship and a walk such as Solomon had. All right. I told you to go to Job 28, didn't I? I'm just about done, so bear with me. We're going to start reading in Job 28 down in verse number 12. He says this, but where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not in me, and the sea saith, it is not with him, it is not with me. It cannot be gotten for gold, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir, with the precious onyx or the sapphire. The gold and the crystal cannot equal it, and the exchange of it shall not be for jewels of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral and of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia shall not equal it. Neither shall it be valued with pure gold. Whence then cometh wisdom? And where is the place of understanding? Listen, wisdom does not come from the things of man, or God's wisdom rather does not come from the things of man. It comes directly from God. If we ask Him, He'll grant it to us. All right, what about this? We can, however, mature in our wisdom. Now, maybe this is where we're at even tonight. And I don't have time to go there, but you can go to Ecclesiastes. Let me give you the scripture references. You can write them down. Ecclesiastes 1:13, Ecclesiastes 7:25, Ecclesiastes 8:16, if you're interested in looking at it. Solomon, once God had granted him wisdom as an older man, writing the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon said something along the lines of that he had set his heart to know wisdom. In other words, he not only had the wisdom that God had given him initially, but he excelled, or he set his mind to purposely gain more wisdom. In other words, he wasn't satisfied by just saying, okay, I've got all. Solomon bettered himself. Solomon walked with God. And then I think we can mature in our wisdom as well. All right, the value of wisdom, and I'm done. And I'll just write these off to you quickly. Proverbs chapter number 2. Proverbs, we understand that primarily written by King Solomon. Instructions to his son. Listen to the first 7 verses of Proverbs chapter number 2. Because here we find a father relaying a message. Now, I already jumped ahead, so I'll give it to you again. Remember I said that David prepared Solomon's heart for wisdom? You know what Solomon's doing to his son? He's passing it down. Son, the value of wisdom. The value of having wisdom. All right, in Proverbs chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, he talks about the pursuit of wisdom. You know, people pursue all different kinds of things, don't they? They pursue career, they pursue money, they pursue fame, they pursue fortune, they pursue power. People pursue all kinds of things. But you know what Solomon, the king, tells his son? He says this. He said, my son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandment with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom, apply thine heart to understanding. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hid treasure. What is that? That's a pursuit. He's making it out. He said, listen, you need to go after her. You need to go after it like you would get for gold or for precious metal or for silver. You need to be passionate about it. You need to make a pursuit. It's that vital. It's that important. The preciousness of it. Verse 4, he talks about as for the hid treasures. All right, what about the provision? What good is wisdom? Verse number 5. Then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom. Man, there it is. The Lord giveth wisdom. Out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. Look at this. He is a buckler to them that walketh uprightly. In other words, he says, son, listen, God can keep you. The way of God can preserve you. It can keep you from a lot of heartache. And so he talks about the provision of wisdom, but then the priority of wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing, right? Therefore, get wisdom. I believe that's Proverbs 4. Proverbs 4 down in verse number 5. Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not. Neither decline thy words from my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. If you only have one thing in life, son, get wisdom. That kind of sounds familiar. Solomon, what's the one thing you want? God, I need wisdom. You ever thought about this? It was an answer. It was a request that Solomon never regretted, and there's proof because he starts his kingdom with it, and he finishes his kingdom with it. Son, get wisdom, and it's that important. All right, what about this? You learn in chapter number 1. You learn about the purpose of Proverbs. It's about granting wisdom and understanding. You can read it 1, verse number 7. All right. But Proverbs 1 through 7 is exemplified, I believe, in David and Solomon's life. And this is where I told you that I believe that David taught Solomon about wisdom. Go back to 1 Chronicles, or go to 1 Chronicles, rather. Chapter number 22. And I'm done. Verse number 11 of 1 Chronicles 22. The Bible says this, now, my son, the Lord be with thee, and prosper thou, and build the house of the Lord thy God, as he hath said of thee. God said, you can't build the temple, David, but Solomon's going to build it. And so he says, Solomon, son, go build the house of God, and the Lord be with thee. But he says in verse number 12, only the Lord give thee wisdom and understanding, and give thee charge concerning Israel, that thou mayest keep the law of the Lord thy God. Then shalt thou prosper. Then shalt thou prosper. And so there was the seed planted in Solomon's life by David that, son, you need wisdom. And that's the whole crux of the message tonight. The wisdom that Solomon had is not just the wisdom that I want, but it's the wisdom that I need. Listen, I need that wisdom to where there's value in that wisdom. I need the type of wisdom that only God can grant. I need the type of wisdom that will direct my motives so that I can lead the ministries that God has called me to lead, so that I can be an example before the people. In order to get this wisdom, I'm going to have humility. I'm going to have some self-awareness, and I'm going to have confidence in God that if I ask it, God will grant it, just like he says in James 1:5. Because verse 6 says of James 1, let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. Nothing wavering. God, I have confidence you can give it. We got to have it. Listen, regardless of what stage in your life you're in, whether you're raising kids or you have grandkids, or whether you are a kid, or whether you're transitioning from childhood to adulthood, whatever stage, we need wisdom. We need wisdom. And I can tell you this, from about the time we think we have it all figured out, here comes the scenario that Solomon figured. 2 harlots and 1 baby and a big mess. All right, you say, preacher, what are you saying? I'm telling you, we have got to have the wisdom of God if we expect to accomplish the task that God has set before us. Let's stand tonight if you would.